Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new Stack show today about how to build an SRE superhero. I am so glad to have two guests today. Alice Goldfuss, staff engineer. Hi, Alice.
Hey, how's it going, Alex?
Great. And Or Elimelech is the site reliability engineer lead at StackPulse. Hello, Or. How are you? We don't have audio with Or, but we'll get that figured out. I want to just get started and just say to everyone out there that this is really an opportunity for you to ask your questions. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube or Periscope, please ask a question in the comments in your stream. Today, the topic is an interesting one, and both Alice and Or are real pros. And so I'm hoping that they're going to do most of the talking today, and I'll just be here to help guide the conversation. And I did see something about it, what a Squarespace engineer wrote, and it helps me sum things up because I know there's been books written on SRE, and Google wrote a book about it, and a lot of people think, yeah, well, that's the way an SRE should be. But I think Alice has made this point too, that an SRE can be anything that really depends upon the company that you're working with and the demands. But one Squarespace engineer wrote, in a manner of speaking, SREs are part medics, part streamliners. They take shifts in the company's on-call rotation, during which they act as design responder, available to manually intervene if the infrastructure system starts to show symptoms. And then it goes on to talk about that. And Alice, it reminds me a little bit about what you were writing about. When in a post I saw that you have, and I posted it in our Twitter stream, and we'll post it again. But maybe you could elaborate that, and this is a good chance for you or chat about different roles you've played over time.
Of course, and I really do like that framing of SREs being medics and not firefighters or soldiers or heroes,
Right.
because especially in the ops tradition and the sysadmin tradition that then became the SRE tradition, there is a lot of that military, hyper masculine self-sacrificing that not only leads to burnout, but also just crowds a lot of people out of the space. Whereas I do believe SRE should be seen as a very highly skilled support role, like a medic or like the healer on the team, so to speak. But yeah, SRE means a lot of things outside of the official Google context, because Google SRE only really works for Google-sized companies, or perhaps just Google. Whereas SRE in other companies of various size and technical shapes can mean someone who keeps the databases online, someone who builds reliability tooling for engineers, someone who manages the incidents. And yeah, it can be a role of many hats. Or what have you been working on under the SRE title?
Thank you, Alice, for the question. So I totally agree with you on everything you just said, because the thing about SRE is the people thing, the blameless culture of just everything that can fail will actually eventually fail. So in the previous generation of sysadmins, so if something crashed, everyone was screaming. It was like a war, and you haven't prepared for these scenarios before, because you expect that everything just stays up, and you don't you are not prepared for failures. And with the SREs culture, you are saying, if we fail, let's learn from it. Let's make the mistakes not come back again. So everything is in the culture, just lets people learn and not blame them. So you won't get fired if you drop the database under an SRE culture, but you might have in the sysadmin culture. Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, maybe we could just get started about this whole then concept of what really makes a great SRE. And, and back to you, Alice, and, outside of these militaristic terms, which I think is really important point here, because in your post, you write about how an SRE can really have to do a lot of things. They may have to play the developer role. They may have to play on call. And there's this fascination, I think, with the role that it's like the most elite job on the team. You're using the latest technologies, you're doing the super work, but actually it's a lot of it is just keeping things updated and keeping things working, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that elite team superhero, we were discussing superheroes today, but I think a lot of that does come from sort of the Google side of things, where historically, at least, you get a leather jacket and a patch. Something that I asked myself when I was writing the article, How to Get into SRE, is what is the difference between an SRE and a software engineer who's on call for their own code? And the result that I came to is that a software engineer on call for their own code has to understand how their code works and how it affects its dependencies, both upstream and downstream. Whereas an SRE has to understand the entire stack and how different systems connect to each other. And so I think that what makes a good SRE, like the first thing you need if you are going to try and be a good SRE, is empathy. In this systems design way. When we think of people with systems thinking, we're saying this person understands the consequences of how this system interacts with another system. And people can generally understand that in terms of like, oh, this computer, like if you're going to create a logging system that only uses TCP packets, you could very well get back pressure on the system that takes something else down. People understand that connection. But I also think empathy and systems connections work. You need that for humans and how humans interact with each other. And in my experience, the best SREs are ones who live in a world where they understand the consequences of their actions on others. And this is the person who, when you are shipping something, they're going to be saying not only how do these systems interact, but also who are our stakeholders? Who do we need to talk to? Let's talk to security. Let's talk to support. How will this impact our customers? Is there a big sales deal coming through? And they're really empathetic, because there are so many new technologies out there, and the technologies, you'll learn them and you'll get there yourself, but it really starts with empathy, in my experience. Or what do you think?
Definitely, Alice. You as the SRE, you code a lot. You have lots of tasks to automate. You write a lot of code like a software engineer, but the software engineer is focused on the product itself. And actually, you build tools for the developers that builds the product. So you basically do the same stuff, but you are the supporter. You help the team go forward. You move away any obstacles that they have. You are also the second layer of on call if the dev has an issue with their service, and it also can be connected to a MySQL database or something that is infrastructure related. There's no pressure on the dev to solve it on its own. So you can escalate stuff to the SRE team, and empathy, like Alice just mentioned, is everything. Is a key point here.
Then what are the common misconceptions then that need to be still worked out for an SRE to really be effective? It seems like that has to be part of what an SRE does, is, helping people understand their role better. So it's done through empathy. I can see that. But what are some of the day-to-day things that are just really critical? It seems like communication is a big part of this.
Or why don't you go first?
Yeah, okay. So the day-to-day stuff is making sure the systems are up and running. Devs can do their work, push the product forward, fine-tuning all the manual stuff you do every day. So helping with monitoring and dashboarding, and sometimes dev asks you to just refine a query in Prometheus or something that helps a lot in introspecting the services. So it's really supporting the team and moving from the more manual tasks into automated tasks, and you'll always have something else to automate, but just helping the team moving forward, and asking all the stakeholders, like, what's the issue, what can I do for you, what can be made better and automated. That's it. What about you, Alice?
Or mentioned helping people with queries in Prometheus and monitoring, and that reminded me of how we mentioned in the beginning about how SRE can take on different roles, and there are different sort of rollouts of SRE. You can have sort of a centralized SRE where there is a separate SRE team that owns observability or the databases or the infrastructure, and then you can also have an embedded SRE model or a blended one where you have both these separate teams but also SREs who are part of a dev team. And that one I have found requires the most balance, because you need enough SREs on the team. You can't just have one SRE, because if you have one SRE in a dev team, then they just become the person who fixes everything, and they don't actually get a chance to get out ahead of the issues and become active instead of reactive. And if you're going to have that interactive model where the SREs are embedded, you need multiple SREs, but that is a very unique positioning where they become extremely involved and knowledgeable on that team's specific goals and opportunities. And I particularly like that model because it leads to like a really strong partnership, and you can get some really strong systems out of it.
Well, awesome. I just saw a question that came in, and so let's put it up there from Baruz Badi. And Baruz asks, how do you balance a blameless culture with accountability? And he has another question too about the tools that you can use that you've seen help empower engineering teams. And then another question on what part of a company's life cycle should we focus on? What is that? What is the what is that part of the project life cycle that you should be thinking about? So pick your question. I mean, there's a few there, but I think these are good questions to dive into.
These are fantastic questions. I would like to take a try at the first one about accountability versus blameless culture, because this is an ongoing conversation and a really good one to bring up. And I think we should talk about what exactly a blameless culture is. A blameless culture is one where there's not necessarily it's not you're finding a scapegoat in a person. This system went down. Don't worry, we fired this engineer, so everything's fixed now. Customers, don't worry about it. A blameless culture is more along the lines of something went down, and it could have been due to this engineer typing in the wrong command. But why was that engineer allowed to type in that wrong command? Why didn't the system catch them? You're allowed to name names, but as long as it doesn't come down necessarily to human error. Human error is not, in my opinion, an acceptable root cause for an outage. Humans are going to make errors. How are we going to build our systems resilient enough to withstand human errors? So yes, there needs to be accountability in the sense that humans are then going to go roll out solutions and build better next time. But it's not the same as we are going to make this one person the scapegoat for this outage and get rid of them so everyone else can move forward, in my opinion.
Or so just as a reminder, there was asked questions about tools that you might help empower people. What are some of the tools you've seen that help empower engineering teams?
Yeah. So I basically love to use chat ops and things that abstract away the infrastructure and processes from their computers to a central place, so a developer can go to Slack and just type whatever they need in order to achieve something in the infrastructure in a sane way. So You write the automated process that takes an input, sanitize it, and does something on the DB in a sanitized way instead of giving a developer access to production DB. This is a way that also doesn't require a new developer, a new team member to install something on their machine and have one unified way of doing stuff, which doesn't break production, and you the entire team agrees on one way to do stuff. So giving them monitoring tools, dashboards. I have something I did here at StackPulse. I think it's great. So zero trust proxy instead of having VPN on their machines. I think it's amazing. It makes the work much easier, especially during COVID. You know, everyone is working remotely, so just connecting to the site and sign in, that makes everything easier on everyone on the team. It's not only devs, it's marketeers and C-levels executives. They all need tools which we export as an SREs.
I really like the idea of having a zero trust network, both like for dev environments and production. I think that's a really good example of making the engineering and the technical solutions protect the humans from themselves, sort of a thing. So yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Has the SRE always been around though? Or is there, or with scaled out architectures, is it something entirely new?
Depends on who you ask, Alex. I mean, a lot of places. So the thing about the SRE title is in different payment structures, an SRE is going to be at a higher salary band than someone with the title of sysadmin. So a lot of companies have been rebranding their existing ops organizations into SRE organizations without actually changing their authority or scope. And so depending on where you go, SRE can mean different things. And so in that sense, I mean, also being an SRE, it comes from having these sysadmin skills and understanding how things fail and understanding how operations work. So yeah, it has always been around. For me, when I think of SRE, I do think of it in the sense of these large scale sites, but that also doesn't necessarily mean that you are supporting a Facebook or a Twitter. It could be that you are responsible for a highly available database structure for a bank or something like that. But for me, it does have a sense of scale to it, although that is not to say that's the same everywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would also add that as I started as a sysadmin, and I think my role hasn't changed enough, but I mean, technically it hasn't changed enough because I'm doing the same stuff. I'm touching operating systems, I'm installing stuff, I'm touching a bit distributed systems now with Kubernetes and configuration management and everything, but the basics, the technical basics are the same. So what's changed during the 10 years, the last decade, was the mindset, the change of the cultural change and evolution in organization that now is built by humans for humans. So having SRE move from the dark sysadmin room to a more developer-oriented company, like sitting with the devs together, hearing their issues instead of like the previous generation, sitting in a silo and here Java executable, run it in prod, I don't care. So hearing both sides, the issues to get like normal human being, hearing the issues and raising them and solving them together. With, I think what's changed in ops perspective is letting developers push more code instead of being conservative about code changes, and letting them do it in a safe way with tools. So I think the cultural change had to come with tools like CI/CD and making sure that everything is tested before going to prod, so both sides are happy. So the SRE, the sysadmins that are now SRE are happy with resiliency and everything that is checked, and they won't wake up in the middle of the night, together with both the business and devs that can push features all day, every day, at night, and it's checked, because no one likes to know that production went down because of him or her. Like, having the production, the bug in production should be stopped before it reaches production with the tooling and culture. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I also think in general, tech has expanded and is way broader and larger than it used to be. And so 20 years ago, we had web developers making great PHP websites, but now we have front-end engineers. And that is a broader, but also much deeper specialty, where I could never be a front-end engineer, that there's just too much to learn. You have to be able to develop for all these different browsers and plugins and settings and languages and frameworks. And I see SRE as similar, except instead of having to know the latest JavaScript framework every 6 months, it's the sysadmin is now out and speaking to people and actually has a seat at the table to talk about all of the problems that they can see coming down the path. And yeah, it's just an evolution of what we've been doing.
I
totally agree. Yeah.
Great. Well, I just want to remind our viewers out there that if you're watching this on YouTube or Periscope, please ask a question in the comments in your stream. And our experts here, both Alice and Or, will be happy to help answer what you would like to know. So one of the questions that I have is just about the types of environments that you're starting to see emerge for SREs that are becoming more critical for the role. What are some of the issues? I think of, resilience in terms of reliability. I think of it also from two sides. One side is the traditional application development side, where you think about development, deployment, and management of these architectures, but also on the security side, where you have to think more about how are you making your architectures more resilient, because now there is just more attack surfaces out there with containers, for instance. And so I'm curious how you're thinking of the roles and their adjustment now. With those new considerations where security and developer worlds are more intertwined.
Well, I think this is where one of the strengths of a strong SRE and SRE supportive culture comes in, because I don't want my SREs doing security. I want my SREs partnering with security. And I don't want my SREs having to write the application themselves. I want them having strong partnerships with those developers where the developers trust them. Because usually when you are introducing an SRE org, it's definitely has a lot of growing pains and can cause a lot of bad feelings at the time, because what typically happens in my experience is you have a great company and they're shipping a bunch of things very fast. And then all of a sudden, a lot of tech debt needs to be taken care of. So they decide, all right, we're going to have SREs now. But really what that means is it feels like a punishment to the developers who've been cranking out these features. Because all of a sudden we have these new processes, you have to get everything reviewed before it ships, you have change approval processes, and that is sort of married to the idea of an SRE, and so there can be some bad feelings. Very similar to how there can be an antagonistic relationship with security in the rest of the company, because the security also goes hand in hand with compliance and finance in some ways. And so I think a good SRE has to have that empathy and communication, which Or has also discussed, and needing to make sure that developers feel okay and security feels okay, and managing those relationships. And so, yeah, the environments are expanding and there is a wide variety of threats out there and more to considerations, but one person cannot do all of this. Or is probably trying to do all of this, and I'm sure he is succeeding, but it is a lot for one person to take on. And you want to be working with other experts in your field to help move everyone forward.
Yeah, agree. Alice, it's great. Everything you described is just the way we do stuff here. So everything is intertwined with developers and product, and you have the constant battle between product and devs, and now discussing product through SLOs and SLIs makes everything the KPI is easier to understand, and product can understand that the AO budget is running out and we should push more reliable code instead, push for reliability instead of I don't know, push features and maybe moving tasks to the next sprint and stuff, and making common language in the organization. So SRE is making that language available to everyone because we build the infrastructure. So you rely on the infrastructure to build everything else. So building BI tooling, building the insights, the marketeers, everything is infrastructure based. So laying out the foundation for this, for the organization to rely upon, that's a great foundation to start with. Yeah.
I really like that metaphor, or just the idea of sort of like you are building this foundation, you are building a place for people to come play. And so it's sort of the SRE's job to make sure that everything is safe and welcoming so the developers can come in and build on top of it. That's great.
We are getting lots of great questions coming in. So I'm going to start with Vivek Junesha, who has a question about enablement. He asks, how do you see enablement as a function for the role of SRE in a small to mid-size organization? And by enablement, Vivek means promoting the right practices and patterns among developer teams.
Or why don't you take this? I mean, you're the lead SRE at StackPulse, so I feel like this is something you're dealing with right now.
So thank you. I think working together with devs to build the foundation for the software they use daily, like I said before, I do write software daily, but instead of writing the business logic, I would go with the devs and work on the SDKs and libraries to help them write better resilient code with stricter APIs that are just developer experience first, and enabling the devs to just taking away their problems like a psychologist, like taking everything away from their desk and let them focus on the business logic and just, yeah, I feel like a problem solver, not an SRE, like the medic you just described at the beginning, Alex. Yeah.
I will say that when I have seen SRE being rolled out at small to medium orgs, what is required, which is the same as any organizational change or process change, is executive buy-in. And this is one of the reasons why SRE was successful at Google, is because it was known in the engineering org that the SRE philosophy and process and error budgets went all the way up to the top. And so if you as a developer had a problem with something, you would know if you got into a room with an executive who they would back. And that is how that ship was able to turn. And so if you are rolling out SRE at your company and you are trying to cause this culture change and this process change and this new way of thinking, you really have to have backing and support from the higher ups. You can't just hire a team of SREs, like a 3 or 4 person team who reports to a manager or maybe a director, and just assume that they will be able to change your company for you. It has to start from the top so that it can trickle down over time, and you have those reinforced bonds, because you're really introducing a complete new way of thinking. And it is going to be a change, and there are going to be growing pains. But as long as it's understood by the engineers over time that this is the new way of doing things, and yes, it's rough for everyone at first, but we're all in this together, and it goes up to the top, things will change and settle out, and you can open up communication so it works well for everyone and everyone is satisfied.
We have another question. I'm going to pose a question from John Basile, and he asks, does architecture belong in the proactive side of the SRE team, or do you partner with architecture? Or why don't you take that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at least at StackPulse, we do it together. The architecture is built by the SRE team and the architect. So the architect mainly takes the business side of things, like the microservices and the way the code is written and stuff. But we as an SRE take the entire infrastructure and how the database is sharded and everything is co-located, and how the region will be set up, and we use this database or this technology, and coming to a solution together. That's the nice thing about SREs. So we are fusing the development together with ops together.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you want. Yeah, absolutely. That's what you want. You want a really healthy relationship between the SRE, architecture, developer teams. Is the company, the execs are saying, these are the goals we want to hit. These are the customers we want to get. These are the things we want to ship. And then the leaders of your engineering division sit down and they say, well, this is what we need to ship. And then SRE can say, okay, well, this is how we need to support that. This is what we need to put in place. And architecture can say, this is our design. And SRE can go, okay, well, we need to order this many servers, or we need to make sure we have this many dedicated lines. And you come up with something together. I have worked in organizations where things are a bit more disjointed than that, and I much prefer it when the conversations are early and often.
Excellent. I wanted to ask a question from Danny 305P, and Danny asks, what role do you think high-level tools such as Service Mesh have for the daily work of SREs? Do you think there is already a sufficiently mature tool ecosystem in the industry? Alice?
Yes, I definitely have opinions on service meshes. So I did used to work at GitHub on the Kubernetes infrastructure there, and at the time I helped work out like a proof of concept for whether or not we would be investigating a service mesh with Istio. And at the time we decided not to, because it was very young in the project. I think you can substitute out service mesh with any tool, because they are tools to get your job done. And you could be asking, in 10 years, it's going to be a different tool that no one has heard of yet. And 10 years ago, it would have been Docker, or, well, proto-Docker. And really, the question just comes down to, what is the tool that you need to get your job done? If a service mesh, if you sit down with the things that a service mesh provides you, so things like the zero trust network that Or was talking about, you can get that with a service mesh. You can get performance and load balancing and testing and stuff like that. And if that is something that you need and you can't get it anywhere else from like a more mature tool line that has been out for years, then yeah, do a service mesh. Just make sure that you're evaluating it based on what this tool is actually getting you, that it's actually adding to the stability and usability of your infrastructure, rather than the fact that it's shiny. But whether or not this fits in with like high day-to-day tasks of SREs, absolutely. It depends on the makeup of your company, what your SREs are touching. Service mesh was part of my job. Edge networking was part of my job as an SRE/infrastructure engineer. So it's whatever the tools that are best suited for enabling your developers and making your infrastructure safer and better are what you should be going for. Just make sure you evaluate them.
Exactly. So we leverage service mesh here at StackPulse. The thing with service mesh, I never looked at it as a magic solution to everything. So I think tooling and buzzwords is nothing without the culture. So the culture pushes the way you pick up tools. So the thing with Service Mesh, which I really loved, is, like I said before, I try to build libraries for developers to use on their software to make their lives easier, while using observability and tracing and everything. And with the Service Mesh, it's built in. So the way we did in lots of previous companies I used to work for, so we had one language. We didn't allow any other languages. We choose Java or Scala or something, and we provided framework that everyone loaded as a library, and they got service discovery, they got resiliency, retries, and all the things that Service Mesh does today. The thing with Service Mesh is, if you want to make developers prosper and have the ability to pick the right language or the right tool for the job, you have to give them a tool that will prevent you from copying the same logic over and over again as a library for the entire stack. Well, you'll get tired eventually. So the thing with Service Mesh here at StackPulse, we use Linkerd, so it's a very simple service mesh, and it gives you observability out of the box. It gives you retries and gives you the traceability that you need, that developers need, without writing a single line of code in their side, so they can see their entire metrics and health in the Grafana dashboard without investing one line of code. And they will it will work for Python and Go and Java and Ruby and everything. So we use gRPC. It's another tool. Yeah, we could have gone with the rest, but we chose gRPC. It helps. We could have built the load balancing and everything inside our apps, but it will lock us to one language, and it will be hard to scale the SRE team. So I think picking the tool to fit the culture and not the other way around. So
I really like that. Yeah, definitely culture first, and then you just pick the tools that fits for your culture. And Linkerd is a great example because that is a more like mature, older service mesh solution.
We have more questions, and so we might as well ask them. So we have a question from BDubs012. What's your advice for someone who finds themselves as the only one in the SRE role? Alice?
Deep condolences. That is a very painful place to be. And also, unfortunately, I'm not sure you're actually allowed to be an SRE. Like, I'm not saying you can't be. I'm saying I don't know in a company in that structure that you're actually being allowed to do SRE work and think proactively and plan things and be a partner in things. It's more like you are the one ops person who has been saddled with a lot of technical debt, in my experience. And my advice for that would be, I mean, it depends on where you are in your career. And if you are using this as a stepping stone to like really grow yourself, but please don't burn out. First of all, please watch yourself and try not to burn out. I know that's especially hard right now with everyone home and having not much else to do, but try not to burn out, and also see if you can ask to get other people hired into your role so you have a support structure, because you are going to need other people to balance different workloads, and that way you can start prioritizing things. And it's also a really great way. I mean, the more people you have, the more different experience levels you can bring, and you can start growing other people. Something that you could do is try to find accomplices in the developer side of things. Find developers who are managing the CI for their teams if they're at their point, or might have questions for you on, hey, can I get sudo access on these servers? Can I SSH in and manage these processes myself? That is the beginning of an accomplice, where you can start talking with them about things and bouncing ideas off them. And then over time, you kind of have like a secret 50% SRE that you can start relying on for things and eventually bring over to your side.
That's very clever. Very clever.
That's great. That's exactly what I did. It's only been a month that we have our second SRE. I hope he listens to the talk. So I was the first for the since the foundation of StackPulse. So building it from the start was a great experience. I loved it. And the thing is, like Alice just mentioned, is taking on coffee breaks and everything, taking a developer aside and just chatting and enjoying and having a company and just raising ideas on how to make their lives better by convincing them and evangelizing the SRE practices and leveraging their role, like having a team leader with you or the architect and having them on your side pushing stuff together. It just takes a lot of burden from the single SRE at a company, but having a second one, I can definitely say it's taking the support role we want to automate and at least taking the day-to-day tasks and spread them across the team. It's way easier. You can focus. You can say, okay, this day I'm focusing on automation and the next gen infrastructure. You do this, I do that. That's great.
Exactly.
Wow.
Congratulations on your second SRE. That must be fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we have another question, and then we'll finish it out with a second question. So this first question comes from Kojak. As an SRE, which are the must-have metrics to measure? Or?
So it depends on the business. Like Alice and I mentioned during the conversation, everything is culture, everything is people. You have to build with the stakeholders, with your dev teams. You have to build KPIs that make sense for your business. Okay, so I don't know if it's Instagram, how many stories were failed to upload today? I don't know. Something you should definitely set up with the entire team and not as a standalone SRE. It doesn't work as an SRE. You have to push everyone to look at the same metrics. Like I mentioned before with the SLO, communicating with product over an SLO, it wouldn't be possible before. So just saying, this is the way we do this today. This is how we measure stuff. And that's the way to go. It's not strict. Every company does SRE differently.
100%. This is actually a common interview question, and it's a silly one in my opinion, because it really does depend. Like, what is important for us with this service? Do we, if it's got thousands and thousands of threads and we're not actually saving state of data, then we probably don't need to monitor whether or not some of these things fail, as long as it's underneath a certain percentage threshold. Like, it just depends on the service, the shape of the company, what our customers actually care about. I mean, yeah, it's very broad. So this is where that empathy and communication comes in. Like this entire conversation where you have to sit down with your stakeholders and find out what actually matters. If you're at a point in company maturity where you have product managers, sit down with those product managers and say, hey, what do customers actually care about? Like what is important to them? And then extrapolate from that. I used to say that my job was translating developer feelings into YAML. And it's very similar to that, where you're just you're sitting down with these stakeholders and saying all right, what is important to us? And then you as the SRE, you're making the judgment call.
Let me express myself here. That's great. I love that. So we have a question from Supra Blue, and we have a few more questions coming in. So if you all have time, I think these are great. Do you all have some time to keep chatting?
I can go a few more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's ask this question from Super Blue. We live in a world where some folks would claim themselves as SRE when they are just QA. Should we establish KPIs or deliverables that SREs should accomplish to keep everyone down to earth? Boy, the QA role, man, it's tough to be a QA these days.
I would posit that perhaps QA means different things at different places.
Uh-huh.
And certainly the QA of Instagram looks different than the QA of a video game. And I don't think I've ever met someone who is just QA, first of all, because QA is an incredibly difficult role. And I don't think I've ever met a QA person who would also claim to be an SRE. And also, I should say that a QA is a wonderful stepping stone into the SRE role if that is what they choose. Similar to tech support is also a very good way into the SRE role because you definitely build up that empathy and debugging skills. And I would not like to live in a world where SRE is considered better than QA, and therefore we need to assign KPIs to an SRE to keep them down to earth.
Yeah.
I don't know. This question kind of rubs me a little bit the wrong way, and it makes me wonder where it's just sort of like, why do you care that these people are calling themselves SREs when you think they're just QA?
Yeah.
Like, mind your business. It's fine. And you know what? It might be that they don't have SREs at their company, and so they are wearing multiple hats. And so, yes, they are also Q&A, but they're also the only person who is keeping the lights on in a different respect. So I think we're all good there. Or what do you think?
Yeah, I think you are totally right, because I don't know. It's not dismissing someone for being a QA. It's just, we are, like I said, we build companies by people, for people. So I can't have a day without a dev and a product and a QA engineer. So we need all to set up a company. If it was that easy to be one man show, and all the companies would be just one man. So on the technical side of things, yeah, I agree. QA has different qualities, technical qualities, than SRE. But if a QA, like a person that has a title of QA and has the qualities of SREs, and I don't know, knows how to drill down in networking and does all the things, and I don't know, if it was the first QA before the DevOps guy or girl got into the job, and set up the entire infrastructure on EC2, and I don't know, with some bash script, he or she can call themselves whatever they want, if it makes them comfortable. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, that's a great way to put it. And also, part of the SRE like culture and philosophy, as we mentioned with like being the only SRE in a company, is you want other people thinking like SREs. You want that culture to spread. So if a QA engineer has SRE instincts, then that's great. More the merrier.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, this has been so much fun, and we've had so many great questions. I want to thank our audience out there for really participating in this discussion. And it really adds so much when you get these perspectives and you're able to then provide your own expertise. And I want to thank both of our guests, Alice Goldfuss, staff engineer. Alice, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And Or Elimelech is site reliability engineer at StackPulse. Or, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. And thanks again to everyone out there who has so many excellent questions. You all have a great day.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alice. What's great. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.